This is to clarify the question I asked yesterday. Isn't it a basic biological fact that an average man can be stronger than an average woman? Yes, a professional female fighter would obviously be stronger than an average man, and of course there are exceptions such as below average, physically weak men, but that is a general fact. If this is the general fact, why are people still making unrealistic claims? This happens on both ends of the gender spectrum. Men. All men are stronger than women and could beat every woman on this planet. Women. Any woman who does a little exercise can beat an average man. There are people who want to fight or encourage fighting with professional female fighters to prove their ego or point. Some women do this for pride and get beaten up. Isn't all this insane? Why are so many people doing this? Because of such mentality, I feel society is moving toward more violence, where people will force others to fight against someone of a different gender who is stronger. It feels dystopian and dangerous to me. I also find it crazy that nowadays people give so much importance to brute force and physical strength alone. There are other important qualities in a human. Story 1. The issue is that some people are so focused on gender equality that they are willing to ignore basic biology. Most people accept that men and women should have equal rights and opportunities. However, some insist on denying any differences between men and women. This is an example of extreme ideological belief. Story 2. Humans are quite bad at accepting something as fact when it conflicts with a sincerely held personal belief. Add in the general lack or reduction of common sense, and you get the cognitive dissonance described in your question. Story 3. Some people are not intelligent enough to understand what average means. If you say men are generally stronger than women, they will respond with something like, "That cannot be true because I know a woman who is really strong." I think, if I remember correctly, they say it applies to people below about 85 intelligence quotient, which is about 15% of the population. Story 4. People saw how much fun anti-vaccination activists and flat earth believers were having denying science, and they wanted to join in. Story 5. People also believe the world is flat. Some people do not like to let facts ruin an opinion or agenda. Story 6. Because men try to emphasize it and women try to minimize it, in real life, male strength and endurance are very important for many jobs, but society does not want to pay for it. Story 7. People struggle with statistics on the internet. Half of them point to the median, the others to the margin, and claim the other is lying when it is all the same distribution. Story 8. I have met an unusual woman in the past who claimed she was stronger than most men and would go out of her way to try to beat the weaker-looking man in an arm wrestle to make herself feel good while simultaneously trying to make the man feel bad about himself. I am in my 40s and would say I have only met 2 such women who acted this way. Most women learn from a very young age that it is important to assume men are stronger in order to avoid situations where they might be pinned down and unable to fight back. This is understandable. Story 9. I think it is just because people are not well informed. We really should have more statistics and mathematics in school. Edit. I include myself in the statement, people are not well informed. Good heavens, I used to believe some really delusional things. Story 10. Nobody reasonable would refuse to acknowledge this basic reality. Everything you said is correct, and there are studies that back up physiological differences between the sexes. A study, for example, shows that men survive car crashes more frequently than women. There is no malicious intent in acknowledging facts. Story 11. I am a lazy, skinny male, probably below average at this point, I hope. I know a couple of gym girls who also do mixed martial arts training. The strongest among them can lift me almost above their head. While I most certainly would not win a fight against them, I do outperform them in deadlifts and arm wrestling. Story 12. It is because of the Billie Jean King branch of feminism, a socially lazy solution that thinks equality means anything you can do, I can do better. For women to be equal to men, society has accepted the notion that women must be equally good at traditionally masculine activities. This idea keeps social ideals embedded in the belief that masculinity is superior to femininity and tells women that if they want to be important like men, they need to be like men. It is the laziest of all solutions because it requires the least amount of cultural change. Men and women are equal as long as we accept masculinity as superior and remain entrenched, even if we have to deny how any woman can be just as masculine as any man. Story 13. I think the issue is not the subject itself. It is just that usually when a person brings up the subject, it is to make some other point regarding sexism. There are many sexist men who use this biological feature as justification for some of their views, including their views towards transgender athletes. This kind of dialogue has been around for a long time, except for the transgender sports topic. One thing those men overlook, willfully or not, is that training, genetics, and individual body chemistry play a major role. If you line up all the athletes, you will find some female athletes ranked higher than males. This is often used to counter the first group's argument. Like with all things, there are people arguing in good faith, people arguing in bad faith, and people who are genuinely irrational. The subject itself is not wrong, but the reason it is brought up is often suspect. You often cannot tell the other person's disposition ahead of time, so people frequently respond with preemptive defensive statements. Cue argument. Story 14. That is just the internet. Real life is different. No one actually cares. Most people are not violent towards their fellow humans. Only unstable individuals go out fighting in the streets. The fact is, anyone who trains or practices martial arts is most likely stronger than anyone who does not. Simple as that. If someone wants to measure their abilities in a ring, they can figure out their pecking order there. Still, that is irrelevant to the everyday life of most people. Story 15. There are videos on YouTube where women using steroids do arm wrestling with an average man and still could not beat him. It is all social media falsehoods. Story 16. Yes, it's basic biology. A man and a woman of equal size are usually not going to have equal strength. Even if she goes to a gym, he is still going to be much stronger just by sitting around and eating snacks. Have I seen female strength athletes before? Sure. A girl at my high school during sophomore year with no prior weight training leg pressed the entire stack of over 700 pounds legitimately. Of course, she was also over 280 pounds, built like a barrel, and had calves larger than most men's thighs at the time. She was unattractive, very strong, and I'm pretty sure that she had some sort of intersex condition given how she developed physically. Story 17. Outside of a few people who do not want to accept it, I honestly do not know anyone who actually believes what you are saying. I also have no idea why you think this will lead to a more violent society. That is a ridiculously stupid conclusion. Story 18. Yes, I think this is a symptom of the internet. Bots, trolls, and similar behavior. Most people intuitively have a better understanding of this in real life. Story 19. It's generally because we are competitive and typically divide sports by gender. So there is not often a clear display of what would happen. This leads to speculation and competition. One might wonder how things would go if we combined the Women's National Basketball Association and the National Basketball Association, for example. In a basic sense of biology, men are just built to be a bit stronger. It is primal and not deliberate. In your example of a trained female fighter versus the average man, you are confusing strategy and strength. A trained female fighter might actually not be stronger than your average untrained man. She would likely have a strategic advantage by sheer skill disparity and might best someone who has no training. I do not have professional training. A professional female fighter could feasibly best me in certain circumstances, especially if it's a powerful kick to my head. A strong head kick is going to send most to the ground, could potentially cause a concussion, or even kill or paralyze you. This takes me back to my strength and conditioning class in high school. The women were just far below the men in upper body strength. Even the scrawniest man in our class progressed beyond the strongest woman who had more experience and time in that class. Where things evened out was lower body strength. In squatting, leg press, and deadlift, the higher performing women were able to somewhat keep pace with the men. The lower performing women were even with the scrawny men. I weigh 170 pounds and I can bench press 250 pounds, almost 100 pounds over my body weight. The strength per pound output is significant. If you put a professional fighter against me and she decided to try turning it into a wrestling match, that is where the strength disparity comes into play. You would also have to factor height and weight disparities. The best female fighter in the world is not toppling a 6-foot-plus giant who just has raw strength. Story 20. A lot of people either do not understand or do not accept the concept of speaking in general terms, that is, phrasing statements according to statistical averages or majorities. For example, Texas voters are more conservative than California voters. Almost everyone on the planet, even non-Americans who have the slightest idea of what American politics looks like, would agree that this is a true statement in general terms. However, I can also guarantee that someone will hear that and respond with a statement like, actually, there are many liberal voters in Austin, Texas. Story 21. I remember when I was working a minimum wage job, the female manager made all the men do the heavy lifting but never made the women do any of it because she said men are strong. We did not get paid extra or receive additional compensation. Story 22. I think it is an offshoot of all those debates about female action heroes or female protagonists in computer games and novels. That is an entirely different debate. People get confused about statistics. Yes, the average male is stronger than the average female. That is no reason not to have female main characters because, in my opinion, a main character is by definition above average. We would not hear the story if there were not special circumstances or special abilities involved. So bringing up averages to use them as prescriptions for fiction is just really illogical. Story 23. Situations like this are where the minority is extremely vocal. Most of the world agrees that an average man is stronger than an average woman, but they do not feel the need to shout it from the rooftop. Story 24. We had someone start a thread about this who, one, kind of had a fetish for the whole being thrown around thing, which she did not get into after the thread started, and two, seemed to assume that the only reason a man would not do that was because he could not do that. It is the assumption that being stronger and proving it is something most of us even think about. It is not like we all just go around imagining overpowering people smaller than us, or that everyone else is one impulse away from being victimized at all times. It is weird. Story 25. Reddit is for the most part very left-leaning, even for your regular Democrat. Issues like this often get dragged into a transgender rights debate and that entire argument. There is a reason for men's and women's sports. It is not complicated, unless you post something about it here on Reddit. Story 26. No offense, your grammar needs improvement. I did not fully understand some parts. In my opinion, anyone who thinks men and women are equal in strength is mistaken. Call me wrong if you want, but I have not felt physically intimidated by a woman since the age of 12. I am 190 pounds and 6 feet 2 inches tall now and work out. I am not massive, but compared to a woman, I am. I do not even think a trained female fighter could beat me. At some point, size just overcomes technique. All of this is just social media acting foolish as usual. Story 27. Does this really come up so much in your life? Because I have to say, other than reading Reddit articles, it never does for me. Story 28. Why is everyone still making false claims? They are not. It is just a fake outrage trend on the internet. Story 29. Because these people have not faced reality in their entire lives. That is how sheltered they have been. Story 30. My wife was a gymnast and college lacrosse player. I outweigh her by 50 pounds, and she can lift me up, either by picking me up with her arms or leg pressing me. She has no chance wrestling me. Story 31. Two main factors. First, some people's displeasure with biological reality and their ideological desire to counter it. Second, the average person's struggle with standard distribution and statistics. Story 32. If everyone is equal, then the idea that some are born with certain measurable advantages does not fit the narrative and should be disputed. Story 33. So instead of 100 men versus one gorilla, let's talk about how many average women it would take to fell one average man. Story 34. It depends more on the people you are exposed to than anything else. Most people I spend time with do not disagree with biological facts. There is, by the way, a way in which women are stronger. They generally live longer than men. Because men have XY chromosomes, they also have more hereditary defects and syndromes. Story 35. Because most people struggle with understanding generalizations and feel personally attacked when you say something they disagree with. Example, the person elsewhere in this thread who called your conclusion very stupid with no counterpoint. He is not interested in discussion. He behaves like a biological large language model. Story 36. Their egos are hurt. They resort to lashing out like cavemen because that is the depth of their emotions. Story 37. There is a trigger. Yes. Average man versus average woman equals no competition. Period. But it doesn't really cause violence. Story 38. Because social media misleads women and movies influence them. Then politicians and uninformed people with platforms agitate them even further. Corporations then join the trend to increase profits and obtain investment from BlackRock's diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. All of them do this to both sides. They say one thing to one side and something different to the other, while benefiting from their agendas. Before long, the masses become irrational, engaging in unwise behavior and dividing themselves. This applies to everything, not just gender, but also race, religion, migration, and nationality. It is up to the people not to fall for it. Story 39. Some people think movies and social media are reality while ignoring facts, reason, biology, and what they see in their day-to-day life. Some women are told they are strong and many men are weak, so much that they believe it while ignoring what they see. The average man in America is 6 inches taller, more than 40 pounds heavier, and 2.5 times stronger. That is all biology. Story 40. Because for many people, averages become absolutes, and they start to claim that any man is stronger than any woman, which is incorrect. Story 41. I will take that when people only have their physical worth to rely on and become angry over it, they react. Like many other issues, those who react by fighting versus fleeing or freezing are more likely to be heard from in that group. Story 42. Because we, as a society, have been told for the last 60 to 70 years that there is no difference between women and men. Women can do everything a man can do. Anything you can do, I can do better, and so on. People generally do not like having their ingrained assumptions contradicted. Story 43. Because ideologists always get angry when their ideas conflict with reality. The common strategy is to shout down, mob, bully, mock, revile, and intimidate anyone pointing out the mismatch. Otherwise, they would have to admit their ideas are incorrect. Story 44. It actually shows a very low view of women. They say value is not in strength, but they become very upset when you point out that men are stronger and then accuse you of valuing men over women. Story 45. You hang out with very strange people. I can honestly say that this topic has never come up with any of my friends. Story 46. Because it is not about logic and reason, it is about virtue signaling and trying to promote your own ideologies over others. Story 47. I've met a few people in real life who did not believe the obvious. It seemed they had never spoken to someone with right-wing views in person. It was somewhat of a shock. So who knows? Story 48. I have thought about this one for some time. I think the main reason why this is such a big deal is that it is the one obvious area where it cannot be even Stevens. Many women carry this feeling that they have to prove themselves. When I trained mixed martial arts, I would dread having to train with a female because they would typically hit too hard in practice. For those who are not familiar, you are not supposed to do this, but many of them have this need to show they are as good as a man. It was about more than training, getting better, or getting ready for competition. The women needed to show you that they could hurt you. You could not really hit them back either, as you would with a man, to check his ego in the gym, because then you would be seen as picking on women. Wrestling or grappling. Forget about it. On the rare occasion I did that with a female, it went badly. Ego fully engaged. Never mind my Division I wrestling background and purple belt. It is because I am heavier that I am struggling. Men see this as the gotcha. Still cannot throw a ball as far as me. This is especially common among men who are less skilled or who are struggling in some respect. It is one of those things any man will use when a woman tells him that anything he can do, she can do better, and that the future is female. They will always have their strength, so they use that argument. Story 49. The fact that whenever this question is brought up, people cling to extreme outliers or dissimilar comparisons, such as a professional female fighter versus a male with disabilities, as a means of disproving the general rule, is proof that the general rule is true. People make this claim because admitting the truth, that men on average are stronger, conflicts with their worldview that women can do anything men can and that women are just as capable as men, beliefs they have relied on to shape their persona. When your personality is based on misinformed beliefs, you will have to ignore some truths. Saying that men are stronger than women is not intended to disparage women. It is not meant to mock or put them down. It is simply a statement that we are different. Yet, this is often taken as a personal attack. Story 50. I am not sure this is the epidemic you are making it out to be. I hear about this nearly always from insecure men who have little skill or fitness, wondering if men like them can beat a female athlete. It is overcompensation and it is always just talk. It is Andrew Tate behavior. Story 51. These people belong to a religion that only makes sense if you deny reality. They will never admit they are wrong because everything fails if they do. Story 52. The issue arises when a man wants to participate in women's sports, and people deny the physiological differences between men and women. Otherwise, open all leagues, sporting events, and bathrooms to all genders. Eliminate female-only awards and similar distinctions. Story 53. That last statement is important. There are other qualities which are important in a human, and this is exactly what people are missing. We are biologically made to be two different puzzle pieces that become much greater when joined together. Women are generally better at nurturing and nursing jobs, while men are generally better at strength and craftsmanship jobs. Men who consider women completely inferior are probably sad in their echo chambers, while women who think it is sexist to not allow women to do physically demanding tasks are also probably sad in their echo chambers. The reality is that we are both great at our own tasks. Nothing should be personal. This strength debate, suggesting that women are bad if they are weaker than men, is illogical and fuels unnecessary envy and anger. Women should not feel inadequate because they are physically weaker. It is simply a fact and not a negative one. Men, for example, often cannot handle babies as well as women can. Women have the mentality and ability for nursing and babysitting. Personally, I would feel safer putting my daughter in a female babysitter's home rather than a male one, daycare, or even with elementary school teachers. Overall, this gender debate that misuses or ignores scientific facts to fit certain ideologies is unproductive and ironically degenerative. Story 54. Part of the problem is the media. I have seen far too many movies where the highly skilled female protagonist beats up a group of men. That would be somewhat realistic if these were average men on the street, but she is fighting equally skilled men. All else being equal, size and strength will decide the outcome. Men are not just slightly stronger, they are much stronger. Women who have been training in the gym their whole life will regularly be outperformed by high school boys or men with only a few months of training. Women are naturally better than men at many things, but building muscle is not one of them. The gap is significant in that area. Story 55. Yes, a professional female fighter would not necessarily be stronger than an average man. It is also not clear if she would be stronger than a moderately strong man. Men are generally much stronger than women. Why is everyone still making incorrect claims? Hollywood and people confusing fiction with reality. Some people's ongoing denial of any physical differences between the sexes. Regarding fighters, there was controversy with Rousey refusing to fight transgender women for safety reasons. Story 56. I do not think television and film help, as it is not uncommon to see an action scene where a small woman who is not a professional fighter trades blows and wrestles with a much larger man as if there is no difference in weight or strength. Story 57. Women. Any woman who does little exercise can beat an average man. No human being has ever said that. Ever. In real life, anyway. There is a reason why women have to go above and beyond to learn self-defense, because any average person can just fling an arm at them and cause serious damage. Story 58. I think many men underestimate how strong a woman can become without being a professional Ultimate Fighting Championship fighter or appearing enhanced by steroids. They may also overestimate their own strength as untrained men. No man wants to imagine that a petite gym-trained woman could toss him around like a rag doll. However, the reality is that natural 120-pound women can deadlift 400 pounds for repetitions without being professional athletes, while the average semi-athletic but non-weight trained man typically has a 1 repetition maximum of 180 to 220 pounds. Meanwhile, the women who train want that hard-earned recognition. As a result, feelings get hurt on both sides, people become upset, and conflicts escalate. Story 59. If you acknowledge any biological differences that show that women are not equal to men, then you do not have to stop at strength. It opens the door for acknowledging other inequalities that women cannot control. Story 60. Because of such mentality, I feel we are moving towards a society that will eventually become more violent, where people will force each other to fight against a person of a different gender who is stronger. Setting aside concerned trolling, the entire premise is faulty. Recognizing this for what it is, this is standard conservative does anyone else find wokeism bad argument. Story 61. It is a fact of life that men are generally physically stronger than women, whereas women are generally emotionally and psychologically stronger than men. Some people prefer to argue over differences rather than focus on the fact that we can complement each other's strengths and weaknesses. Story 62. I think there are many insecure men who cling to and probably overrate the difference just to feel superior at something. Story 63. I personally think the idea that an average man versus average woman is nearly false. Our society, which emphasizes manual labor for men, surely has an effect on their physiology. Story 64. I feel like many people do not understand that equality means equal freedom and opportunity, not that men and women are identical. There is a reason that for tens of thousands of years men hunted and women gathered. We are physically capable of different things, but while different, those things are no less important than one another. Story 65. This is not a real thing by any stretch of the imagination. The only time I have seen this premise taken seriously is here by you or this account. Why are you making this a thing is a better question. Reddit is such an experimental ground for propaganda these days that everything is suspect. These strange wag the dog posts are interesting, but where is this going? Has artificial intelligence identified this as a fracture point? These gender issues we are seeing? I constantly see these popping up with absurd premises, and the answers take the question seriously. This is not real. Story 66. I seriously doubt your average person believes what you described. Where are you hearing this so often that you are generalizing to everyone still making unsubstantiated claims? Story 67. Guys who say all men are stronger than all women tend to be the men who are not stronger than most women. An example is Matt Walsh. His elbows look like a sparrow's kneecaps as he talks about what a real man is. Story 68. Why do you even care? Any generalized conversation about men versus women is just people stating average facts as a facade for their sexism. It is completely devoid of context and practical use. Men are stronger than women. Okay, true. So what? Story 69. Ego and people unable to grasp nuance? Yes, we have two overlapping normal distributions with a slightly higher male strength maximum, but nobody talks about the remarkable female strength endurance and recovery speed that easily surpass males. Story 70. Point of view. A group of cisgender men complaining about and criticizing transgender people when the original poster does not even mention the topic. Society is in a difficult state if minorities can be dismissed this easily. Story 71. It does not take a woman wholly dedicated to strength training to get stronger than the average man. The difference is marginal, so the bell curves for strength by gender mostly overlap, in a similar way to the flexibility by gender or lifespan by gender curves do, only in the opposite way, with women doing better in these on average. Ultimately, these are not differences worth worrying about. They certainly should not matter in regards to policy. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.